You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Another family losing their home. San Francisco transplants are displacing Tahoe locals. Why are we reading about this on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast? Well, we read stuff that has to do with real estate, and these are trends that are ongoing. So what we've got going on here with all the moratoriums on evictions, what you can and can't do, people moving to the burbs, this is one of those trends. This is one of those storylines that I found super interesting. I hope you do too. We're going to dive into it. That's what we're doing today on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast, covering San Francisco and Tahoe. If you're new here, thanks for joining. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. I talk about business. I talk about real estate trends that you want to hear, that I enjoy reading. All right, let's jump into it before any more chit chat. Another family losing their home. Now you might think, and this is clickbait. It's clickbait because I read it. But for those of you who sent this to me, thank you so much. Much appreciated. You guys are doing my job for me, right? Another family losing their home. You think, oh my gosh, this poor family's been kicked out. Well, it's kind of that way. But work with me here, all right? The post began, family losing their home. Owners have decided to move up from the Bay, and we have 60 days. Got to get out. They've given us notice. I know this is a long shot with how crazy everything is right now, but we are a family of 4 plus a kitty looking for a rental in the basin. What they're saying is, oh my gosh, we got to move our family and our cat. There's no rental housing, and that's what we're getting into. There's no option. There's no long-term options in Tahoe. It's a lot of short-term BRB, Airbnb. Not, why did I see BRB? Bring your own, whatever. When Rachel Brigham posted that message to a popular Facebook group for Tahoe truckee locals on March 24th, she was desperate. Her landlord dropped the news just a few days before their lease expired on April 1st. April Fools, you got to move. Oh, that's a brutal one. I would never do that. That's just what came to mind, right? They were moving to Tahoe from San Francisco and wanted their house back. The Brighams had decided had to find somewhere else to live as soon as possible. So this is going on, right? I mean, you've got people moving that have rental properties, and they're like, okay, I want out of the city. And this property that I thought I was maybe going to use for retirement or whatever, yeah, I'm going there now. We have great references, Brigham said in her Facebook post. My husband and I have lived in Tahoe for 10 years. This past year, as San Franciscans flee the city and move to the mountains, longtime truckee and Tahoe residents are getting displaced. We've got some of that going on here in the Seattle area too. People are jumping out to what used to be kind of sleepy, neighboring, I would call them rural suburban communities. They're not really, I just hate saying rural, because in the appraisal world, when you check the rural box, basically a lot of lenders won't lend on that. They're like, it's out in the dingles. We don't want to lend on this. What's the deal? So in back end of appraisal, we make everything pretty much suburban, because you could commute from just damn near anywhere now to downtown, right? That means it's a suburb. And checking that suburban box on the appraisal, so much easier to deal with than, rural. It's out in the dingles. It's farm country. You're out in a wooded oasis. You know what I mean? So they're making that transition, and those smaller rural / suburban markets, they didn't have a lot of rental housing to begin with. And now you've got this exodus, especially in San Francisco, you've got an exodus of people taking back their properties. That's what's going on. Lake Tahoe has thousands of Airbnbs available to rent for a few days, but finding a home to live in full-time and rent long-term is near impossible. It sounds about right for for a Tahoe-type community. In a hot real estate market, many landlords are seizing the opportunity to sell homes they were previously renting to locals, taking those out of the rental pool. So you've got a double whammy here. You got a few factors going on. The landlords, the owners of the property, they can make bank right now. There's a lot of people like, all right, we saw a massive group of people that were either retiring or wanting to move on, or maybe their kids were old enough, they're going to college, they no longer needed to be in their home in like West Bellevue. We saw a mass exodus of that because people are cashing in. I can make $1 million in equity by selling my home that I no longer need because my kids are all out the door. I mean, who wouldn't do that? Or you're a landlord. Oh my gosh, I can't do what I want with this property because of these ridiculous moratoriums on eviction. I'm just going to sell that thing. I make $1 million. And I say that, not jokingly, because on some of these properties, especially this upper end stuff, people are making that much money. It's crazy. Maybe it's $500,000. Maybe it's a couple $100,000. I don't know, but it makes sense for sellers right now to sell. And so what you're having is all these properties taken out of the rental pools. Now you've got rents that are going to skyrocket. That's happening right now. Those are trends that obviously are, they're happening. And yet it's going to be like 6 months before major media is like, oh, what happened to the rental market? It's so expensive. Well, yeah, that's because that's how major media tracks things. They're very slow. Others are taking advantage of newfound flexibility in the pandemic to move to Lake Tahoe, giving their former tenants the boot. You're out of here. Those residents are struggling to find new places to live. Tahoe has few long-term rentals available, and with such high demand, rents are going up. You're going to see that here in Seattle, too. You're going to see that in California, all over. I mean, any major market that's got this type of dynamic where people no longer need to live downtown, and that happens in a lot of these tech cities, right? Because those are the places that people can commute maybe a couple of days a week. I think that's where we're headed. Companies that say you can work from home forever. No, that's not going to be the case. Some businesses, yeah, but those are more of the one-offs that I see. I see there still being a need, and big corporate is going to demand that their workers, they come into the office downtown. In the past 6 months, rental prices in Lake Tahoe and Truckee have risen by 25 to 50%, says Colin Froelich, CEO of Landing Locals, an organization that aims to place local renters with homes to rent. Last year, a 3-bedroom home might have rented for $2,000 to $2,500 a month. Now those same houses are renting for closer to $3,000 a month. Big increase. So again, you've got small supply of rental housing, and you've got a couple of different factors. Landlords are selling the stuff off because, don't want to deal with this. And also, we're going to take that for ourselves. While larger houses are renting for $5,000 a month and higher. That's pretty astonishing, Froelich says. He keeps a close watch on the region's rental inventory, tracking every Craigslist and Zillow post and entering them into a database. Somebody's got to do it. Glad that's not me. Databases, I see a spreadsheet or a database and I immediately lose interest. It's all these facts and figures, and I'm just not that kind of guy. I can array my data. I can find the mean, median, and the mode, but that is really, I can identify a possible outlier, and that's only because over the years that's been drilled into my head in the appraisal world. All right, this is how you get value. Well, it kind of is, but there's a lot of things in the appraisal process that just don't make sense. And at the end of the day, you got to use your instinct. Is what the buyer paying for this home, is it worth it? And are you going to report that back to the lender? Or what are you going to do? That's what my career has kind of been based on. And sometimes it's not necessarily based on the data and the science. It's based on some other stuff that is kind of a little bit more tricky than coming up with comps, but I digress. That's a podcast for a different day. According to change of address data obtained by the San Francisco Chronicle, of those who moved out of San Francisco last year, more transplants landed in Truckee than any other zip code. In August 2020, Truckee's main zip code saw 130 new households from San Francisco compared to 11 in August of 2019. So up over 10-fold. What is that? That's an enormous increase. I know it's small numbers, but it kind of gives the idea. Okay, didn't have a lot of people moving from San Fran, the Windy City. No, Chicago's the Windy City. Didn't have a lot of people moving from San Francisco to here, but now you got a lot, right? Meanwhile, Landing Locals has a database of more than 400 Tahoe and Truckee families and individuals, upwards of 1,000 people total, who are currently looking for a place to rent. This is a real story. This isn't just, it kind of happened to a few people. About 44% of those households said they were displaced because their old rental house is being sold or their lease is ending, which is often because the property owner wants to move in or needs the house back. Froelich and his wife, Kai, who is the company's chief impact officer, keep in close communication with the people in their database so that when a house becomes available, they can be ready to move in. It sounds like it's one of those deals like, hey, if you want this house, come right now, take a look, and you're going to need to sign the lease like Johnny on the spot. It's that kind of a market. And that's where this whole real estate market is just whacked. It's just crazy. And a lot of this has to do with the restrictions that have been put in place. It's working against the tenants. When are people going to figure that out? It's working against the tenants long-term, full circle, right? We in real estate can see it and you're like, that's not going to work out well. And yet it's meant to protect the tenants and it's just going to, it's just, not a good story. Not a happy ending. How's that? Froelich is also working with the town of Truckee on a program that gives second homeowners a financial incentive if they rent their empty houses to locals. And he's hoping to expand the program to other towns and counties in Lake Tahoe. Trying to persuade second homeowners to rent their empty homes to locals is a worthy cause. They're just trying to do something to get more supply in the system. While hundreds and hundreds of homes are selling on the real estate market, the inventory for rentals is extremely limited, Froelich says. While they're being displaced, why are they being displaced? Well, certainly the rental house being sold is very obvious. The market's booming, Froelich said. It's probably a combination of owners wanting their house back or owners wanting the flexibility of potentially selling or using it themselves. We want to get away from San Francisco, where how many times have I blabbed on about the craziness of the market there? Did one yesterday on when Governor Newsom was then mayor of San Francisco. Got rid of a whole bunch of garbage cans, and now they've got a major garbage problem going on, and they are putting some garbage cans, or they're considering, maybe we need some more garbage cans, because the genius thought, and that's why people are leaving San Francisco in droves for this kind of thing, is people are dumping too much garbage in an area. Now, in order for us to overcome this obstacle, in order to get through this, let's take the garbage cans away. Let's see how this social experiment goes. Let's let it run for years and years and years. And then we'll look and see, there's a lot of garbage on the streets. There's a lot of garbage in the areas where we don't have the cans. Maybe we should put some garbage cans back in and reevaluate, rethink, reimagine this social experiment. I mean, literally. Take the garbage cans away? What? So they figured out that is not the solution, but those are some of the reasons people are leaving San Fran, right? Other than it's kind of become a real rat race and a lot of people are like, get me out of here. And if you've got a second home or something that you can go to, maybe that's what you do because your employer has said, hey, you only got to come in for a little bit every now and then, whatever it is. So you're going to be like, yes, I want out of here. Let's go. And then you take, housing out of the rental pool. That's the crux of this, right? Since her landlord told her they had to move, Brigham said she has been searching for a new house to rent everywhere. Craigslist, Zillow, property management companies, nonprofits. The few she found online were listed to rent for $5,000 to $8,000. A huge jump from the $2,100 a month they've been paying for their 3-bedroom home. Biting the tenants in the rear end, right? And we haven't even talked about the eviction moratoriums. Out of luck in Tahoe, she was now looking at houses in Reno, an hour's drive away. But the thought of having to leave her community was heartbreaking. Her daughter had just started in-person classes again at Kings Beach Elementary. Tahoe is their home, a place she fell in love with a decade ago. Brigham met her husband here, and together they built a life. She works for the Tahoe Forest Health System Foundation, a philanthropic organization that raises money for the hospital. Her husband is a contractor. Over the years, they've lived in a crowded ski lease, a dingy apartment with the owner shag carpet from the 70s, a slightly nicer apartment near Tahoe City, and now with 2 young daughters, this house in Tahoe Vista. So housing, super expensive in that area, and people do what they need to do as tenants, and maybe they can't scrape enough together for a down payment. They're just not in the position to do that because housing is so expensive in so many of these communities. And so they're just trying to hang on and they want to live there. They love the area, but it's become unaffordable. When my landlord first told us we're going to lose the house and looking at how crazy the market is, the first night I cried so hard, I cried myself to sleep. That is terrible. But I mean, it's the housing market, right? You can't really blame anybody in particular, but there's some extra stuff going on here too. It's like a mourning process to think that you're going to have to leave. I'll be okay 1 minute and then I'm super down and crying the next minute. Then it's like, okay, we'll get through this. It's denial, depression. It's been a rough week and a half. And we hear that from people all the time. Seattle went through a real run where we decided that we needed more housing, and a lot of developers kind of overran certain areas with certain zoning because all of a sudden it became super popular to put up, you tear down the little bungalow, the little Seattle bungalow, and you put up a 4-unit, we call them a 4-pack or a 6-pack of, those skinny, narrow homes that as appraisers we love because you only got to measure a freaking box instead of this big contemporary or traditional thing with an offset garage, 100 angles, 65 measurements. The second floor doesn't match up. In these new townhomes, they're literally, they're a box. And as appraisers, we love that because it's less measuring, less work. It's easier to identify, all right, how big is that place? Well, it's 20 by 45, something like that. And the footprint of the first floor, that is the lot size. That's how that kind of works. And so we went through this long period of expansion here in Seattle where you started putting those things up because we needed more housing. Unfortunately, what it did is it took that rundown, tear down home that people on the low end of renting were renting. Maybe they're paying, $1,000 a month for a complete piece of crap, but it was their home. It was their own rental home that they were renting. All of that got taken out of our marketplace. And a lot of the homelessness that you now see kind of started with that trend. Didn't start, but that really accelerated it along because now you've taken out the low end rentals from the rental pool. Then you can't replace those because things are so expensive now that we're not going back. You're going to have the government, subsidize your housing for the unhoused. And that's what we're kind of working on. So to make matters worse, when Brigham asked for more time to search for a new house, her landlord sent a letter from a lawyer with an intent to sue if they weren't out of the house by April 30th. So this is unfortunately what a landlord and a homeowner has to do to protect their interest in the era of the eviction moratorium. The Brighams sought local legal advice, which said they were entitled to 60 days notice to move, giving them until June 1st. We don't want to be in a place where we're not wanted, Brigham said. We just need time to find somewhere. It's hard right now. Luckily, we are really well known in the community and everybody is looking out for us. As a last resort, Brigham posted her cry for help on Facebook. Within hours, her post had hundreds of comments, likes, and shares. The best way to get to a place right now is going to be knowing somebody who knows somebody. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? If anyone knows anybody local who wants a family living there long term, that's going to be great tenants and pay rent on time. People know people and they can pass on the message. So good use of social media there. We need a house pronto. For months now, nearly every day, Tahoe Facebook groups are seeing messages just like Brigham's from displaced locals who are pleading for help for somewhere to live. Tahoe doesn't have many resources for stranded tenants in situations like Brigham's. With nowhere else to go for help, locals are posting messages to Facebook groups to spread the word, hoping their neighbors and fellow community members might be able to help them. Truckee resident Allison Cassidy posted her own plea to Facebook just a few days ago. Her landlord decided to move from the Bay Area to the townhouse she'd been living in with her fiancé for 4 years. He's lived there for 7 years. They have to find a new place to live by June when their lease is up. Their landlord denied their request to stay longer. They're getting married this summer, and it's a busy time for work. But he did give Gizel the option to move out earlier. So far, the search isn't looking very promising. The one house Gizel has found for rent in Sierra Meadows is asking $4,000 a month, twice as much as she is currently paying. So some tenants out there with not a lot of options, staring down the barrel of very expensive leases. Gizel says that she's disappointed. She's lived in the area for 7 years and has her own wedding and events planning business called 𝒂𝒂𝒕𝒍𝒆. That probably didn't do well during the Rona. Let's just throw that out there, right? All that stuff just got shut down. Many of her clients are from the Bay Area. Her fiance works for an architecture firm that's walking distance from their house, and he's working towards his license. She also recently started a networking group for female entrepreneurs in Truckee, so they don't want to move out of the community is the bottom line. It's disappointing because we've invested so much into this community and we've really given our hearts and souls to it, Gizel said. We make good money. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to live in the community we work in. And yet, financial dynamics in the real estate market, they are saying something else. They are saying only the wealthy, or only if you make this much, are you going to be able to live here? Gizel and Brigham fit into what local housing experts are calling the missing middle. Yep. They make too much money to qualify for rental assistance programs or affordable housing, but they don't make enough to pay $4,000 in rent a month or to compete in Truckee's exorbitantly high real estate market. Too expensive. Recently, a new neighbor from the Bay Area moved into a townhouse near Gizel's, paying $900 more a month than she does. For him, it's a break in rent, she said. For us, we could live somewhere else, but it would be really hard to pick up my business and try to go somewhere else and do it. Gizel said she's looking at places in Verde and Reno, further away from Lake Tahoe, which would mean she'd join a long line of Tahoe locals who have given up, moved away, and now commute long distances to work. She posted to Facebook as a last resort. When you're renting out your place long-term, maybe try to rent to someone who is actually in the community and not just someone that's going to live there for a little bit while they don't have to go into the office, she told San Francisco, the newspaper. One of the big questions that keeps Froelich awake at night is what's going to happen to all these homes that sold for exorbitant prices when all these transplants have to go back to the office in the Bay Area. That's a good question. Will those homes sit empty? Will they become Airbnbs? If they do become long-term rentals, Froelich thinks the rents will continue to be higher than local wages can afford. Tahoe's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, which pays much less than the Bay Area's tech industry. It's a big question mark, Froelich said. Is this going to be what we're going to be seeing in this new wave of second homeowners that, one, displaced local renters, and two, probably aren't going to return to the house to the rental pool in the same way? So we've got a shift in housing here going on, right? And because of the dynamics of the San Francisco real estate market, this is magnified versus what you're seeing here in Seattle, what you're seeing in Portland, and what you're seeing in LA and some of these other areas. San Francisco, super expensive. Their neighboring bedroom communities, suburban bedroom communities, also really expensive. And the locals there being impacted, obviously. Or if they do, it's going to be way over what people can afford to pay that are locally employed here, the people in our database. So locals getting placed out, getting displaced, right? Some of the region's biggest employers, like Tahoe Forest Hospital, are working with the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. Again, an enormously long name for an agency. They're working with the housing agency to build places for their employees to live. That's drastic. Hey, we don't have housing for these folks. We got to build some affordable housing to make this go. That effort is moving ahead, currently in the process of identifying parcels that have potential to build, says Emily Vitas, the executive director of Truckee Tahoe Workforce, that long name. But building workforce housing is a long-range solution that takes a long time because you got to go through the development, getting them up and running. People need housing right now. That's just like our homeless. Our unhoused population needs housing right now, not discussion on it. They need roofs over their heads. Not going to happen anytime soon because the inelasticity of the housing market is such that you can't just, you try and do the best you can. You convert some hotels into housing. You got some federal money paying for those hotels, but that's not going to go on forever. What's your long-term solution? You got to provide housing of some sort. For the short term, there aren't many resources besides landing locals to help people who don't qualify for affordable housing and need places to live right now. So it might sound like this is a one-off, but this is going on a lot. People are getting out, affordable housing. You don't have it. And people say, well, it's not a drug problem. It's not a housing problem. It's an affordable housing problem. All right. But are you going to jerry-rig the market to make that work? What are you going to do? Real estate, it is what it is. It's based on the free economy, right? Do we need to go to some form of socialism to get this done? I don't think so. Oftentimes, this is just the way it is. Unfortunately, that's the way I see it, and I'm a real estate guy. It's like, all right, the market moves this way. It's going to have to shift, and some people are going to get caught in the middle, and that's brutal, and I feel terrible for them. But the solution is that there isn't a readily available solution. Oh, go do that. You'll be fine. They're going to have to drive way further, and maybe that isn't a real option for them. Maybe they go live in a different community. I think that's what a lot of people are going to do. They're going to find something that is acceptable to them. They're going to go there knowing, all right, we're far enough out where, I don't see any major employers coming in this area, and I think we're going to be able to afford a rent here, and I can make my business work or whatever. I get a job with whatever. You go down that road. I see a lot of millennials doing that, smart millennials. All right, I don't really want to live in that town, but I can afford it. And if I want a place for little Johnny and Susie to run around in the backyard, that's where I'm going to go. That's what I'm going to do. And I think that's a smart move. If you can make that move, great. If you can't, then you're going to struggle like these folks here that we are. If you're living in a city that has, incredibly high rental prices and, purchase prices. Brigham still has hope. The morning before we spoke, someone had just posted on another Facebook group, Bad Moms of 𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍, about a house available for rent in Kings Beach. It's a tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bath, smaller than the house she currently lives in, but the rent is right, $2,200. It's a place she'd never find on Craigslist, but when she logged into Facebook, many of her friends had tagged her in the post, alerting her to the find. I woke up this morning and I was like, Rachel, she said. A lady posted, I'm actually talking to her now. It's a house just up the street. I hope they get it. The house won't be available for long. Clearly, that is an understatement. So I hope they're able to jump on it. I hope there's a happy ending to this story, because a lot of these stories do not end in happy endings, right? They just don't. You hear of so many homeless people, and we're not even talking about homeless people here. We're just talking about people being rented out of housing in general. Crazy market. And every day, I'm just reminded of how unbalanced this market is. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but the calls I get are just frequently more and more so. Here's one story, and I'm going to just talk about this for 1 second. We are not coming in at value on a purchase appraisals for a lot of deals right now. We can't support the exorbitant amount that these prices have been escalated up above list price. We're not there. Can't do it. Do not have the comparable sales to support the escalations. Buyers don't care. They're putting in Form 22AD, which in our market is a form that says, if you get a low appraisal, here's the appraisal value that it came in at. Here's our purchase price. Even though we escalated up here, what we're going to do, and we realize there's a chance that we may not be able to get financing, what we're going to do is we're going to chip in our own money to make up that difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. So they're going into these deals knowing, hey, we're overpaying, but that's just what you got to do. And for people without a lot of money, this is a brutal market for first-time home buyers because they're competing with a lot of cash buyers, and it's just not a fair fight. So first-time home buyers just getting crushed in the marketplace. Very difficult. A lot of buyer fatigue. People are just kind of hunkering down. They'll take a couple of runs at housing, and it's a difficult time. It's a tough time for everybody because the market is so unbalanced, and it makes everything just wigged out. Everybody is stressed out in the housing market. It's just, it's been a long run, and it looks like it's going to keep on going for a while. I don't know what's going to stop it, but when there is something stops it, I'll let you know right here. The Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Okay, hope you enjoyed this one. I know it wasn't hypodermic needles and, dodging the human fecal matter on the sidewalk, popular topics that I usually talk about, but it is a trend that that makes sense and is out there, and not a lot of folks are going to cover it because it's like, well, that's a weird story to talk about on a podcast. Not on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. We talk about some weird stuff and stuff that, is straight up real estate. And that's what this one was. But it is a trend that's carrying out over a lot of different cities. It's inevitable. The dynamics are the same. So If you want to talk about this at your next cocktail party, which we're not having because we're in the era of the Rona, when's this going to be over? Is it going to be over soon? How long are we going to have to wear a mask? Forever? Talking about that with one of my gym buddies. Like, how long are we going to have to wear this damn mask? Probably for a while. Through the end of 2021, right? Maybe you're not wearing a mask now. If not, good for you. I say no mask for you. That's the area you're living in. Okay, totally get it. Seattle, Bellevue, we're wearing masks still. All right, that's it for me. Take care. I'll see you guys on the next one because I'm recording another one like Johnny on the spot right now. All right, until then, bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.